My guest today is Ed Van Buren, the government leader for artificial intelligence for Deloitte Consulting. Ed, thanks so much for taking the time.
Glad to be here, Jason. Thanks.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. Back in September, there were more than 700 use cases in the federal artificial intelligence inventory. By now, there's probably hundreds more. In the last 8+ months, agencies have launched AI sandboxes and other test beds. They've mostly, I'll say mostly, relaxed policies of how they can use certain types of AI tools like generative AI. And overall, I would say most have become more comfortable with the capabilities around AI. Some agencies like the Homeland Security Department and the Energy Department are more forward-leaning. Others are taking what we'll call a more measured and cautious approach. Meanwhile, the Office of Personnel Management, the White House, and others are trying to fill the workforce shortage. The White House announced in April that the agencies have hired over 150 AI experts since January and are on track to hire hundreds more by the end of the summer. And this talent surge, which includes about additional 500 AI experts between now and the end of fiscal 2025, as well as another 2,500 AI hires at the Defense Department, that includes more than 9,000 AI hires across DoD over the next year, is setting agencies up to be more aggressive in how they apply these tools and capabilities to solve mission problems. But before these new employees can jump into the deep end of the AI pool, agencies need to take some specific steps to continue to prepare for the rise of AI. For how to do that, we turn to Deloitte's Ed Van Buren. Ed, let's just start there. What's the current perspective of AI adoption? What are you seeing? What are some of those trends?
Great question, Jason. We're definitely seeing a lot of enthusiasm right now in government agencies on adopting AI. Many organizations had previously been using AI in their programs and solutions, and they continue to use AI now in this era of tremendous enthusiasm for AI. We are seeing a lot of new initiatives kicking off through things like task forces or working groups, commissions, things of that nature, focusing government leaders on AI to try to bring more and more AI into the workforce. Similarly, in alignment with President Biden's executive order on AI, we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm for fleshing out AI strategies at the organization, at agencies, at department levels to help bring those leaders together and focus their attention on AI towards their primary mission challenges. So we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm right now for AI uses.
With any new technology, we always talk about it in the crawl, walk, run. Imagine you would say most agencies are crawling or just about to get into that mode to crawl.
I think that's right. Crawling and walking. We're seeing a lot of prototypes getting developed. Some of them are getting more matured and are getting put into production. So that's getting into your walk stage there. We're seeing more and more of that. As agencies are getting more comfortable with using some of the new tools around generative AI, they're starting to push some of those applications into production and starting to get some value out of them. But in terms of running yet, I don't think we're at a widespread run yet.
A lot of times when I hear agencies and even industry talk about AI, there's always that, okay, what is it? Where are we at with it? What are we doing with it? Are you seeing kind of that early stage of a lot of, let's say, data analysis using AI? Are you seeing maybe some dipping into cybersecurity? Are there any areas that are more aggressively or more kind of open to AI than others within the government? Or is it, again, it's a mishmash, depends, the depends question, right? Where it depends on the agency and where you live.
Yeah, I would say that in the last 3 years, we've seen a shift of the understanding of AI. 3 years ago, the typical AI conversation was, as you're sort of describing, hard for folks to wrap their head around, hard to understand exactly how to apply it to various use cases. And once they did, it was a very complicated activity to select the algorithms and get your data cleansed and then train an algorithm and try and apply it to the use case. Once generative AI came out and received such fanfare, I think that government leaders have been able to automatically understand what the power of this is. Those tools out of the box allow you to see AI in action on English, in text. You can see it right away, what it can do. And so then it was a much easier pivot to, how do I use this at work? How do I use this inside the boundaries of my organization in support of my missions? So we've seen an acceleration of the understanding. With that said, we're definitely seeing a lot of enthusiasm for bringing the workforce together, bringing leaders together, and doing sessions, fluency sessions, learning sessions, to increase their understanding and how they can apply generative AI and AI generally to various parts of their organization.
You bring up generative AI. I think we'll get into it in a little more detail. Are we at the stage where people are more comfortable with kind of like that AI of we're going to put some data in, see what it tells us, deal with some cybersecurity? Because I think there's still that, at least what I see when I talk to CIOs and others, there's still some hesitancy of, okay, what really is generative AI? What's the power of it? Or is it, what I guess the big trend I'm asking for is if we're in the kind of crawl stage, what does crawling look like for a lot of organizations? Again, public or even private sector.
Right. I think that there's an understanding of what it can do. There's not as much understanding of how it does it and what some of the risks and limitations are. When you get an output from generative AI, it's going to look very produced, very polished. It could also be a complete hallucination. And the tools that have been released are trying to limit that and bring the validity of the output up a lot, but there's still that risk. So organizations are having to look at their use cases and go on a journey, starting with getting some basic insight into the topic and then using it more and more to get more finished products, right? So if you view these tools as giving you a good draft, it's easy to understand. If your standard is, I want a finished product that's ready to ship straight out of the tool, that's a much higher bar to clear.
I love when people talk about AI and hallucinations. We only talked about this in many other ways, but I always love it when you hear that. You're on stage, you kind of look at them and go like, oh yeah, that's what they're talking about, basically garbage in, garbage out type of data. You mentioned the challenge of risks, understanding the risks and the challenges. What else are you seeing around some obstacles to getting that AI really past the crawl into the walk and run stage?
One of the challenges organizations are facing is the data that they have access to and using that with these generative AI tools. While the tools can generate outputs without being connected to organizational data, the power of these tools is greatly amplified if you are able to connect it to policies, procedures, guiding principles, or transactional information that is part of the organization's business. That lets a whole new set of use cases come forward. It does, at the same time, increase some of the risks associated, because now you're dealing with live data potentially, and you have to make sure that that's safeguarded and used appropriately through the entire solution.
One big area I'm seeing a lot of agencies dip into when it comes to generative AI specifically is to cordon off their data, saying this is the only data you can use in this generative AI tool. Is that something you're seeing also across other sectors of government? Is it also in the private sector per se, where they're testing it out, they're creating for, I think I mentioned, AI sandboxes?
Right. Definitely a lot of sandboxes are being created right now. I think the enterprise deployments of these solutions is definitely nascent at this point. And so organizations are taking a measured approach in bringing pockets of their data against these tools. And when they're doing that, they're doing it in a way that sort of limits the risk associated with any one deployment or any one use case.
At the same time, I know there's a lot of policies out there, a lot of warnings that say don't put anything out there that you don't want out there, right? If you use a ChatGPT or use a large language model, they say don't put anything in there that you don't want exposed to the real world. So I think that's why they're cordoning off a lot of these test cases. Is that in your view, a good way to kind of overcome some of those risks, some of those challenges, the learning process? Why is that a good approach?
Yeah. Well, I would say, like from the movie Jurassic Park, life will find a way. AI will find a way. So the workforce is going to bring AI to work in some way, shape, or form, whether or not the organization makes it easy or hard. And what we're seeing is a lot of organizations are realizing this, and they're saying, our workforce wants to use something like a ChatGPT. We need to make sure we have a secure version of that to use. For example, in our organization, we've launched a tool that we use that has all the security that we need in the functions of a typical generative AI chatbot.
And the guardrails you put around that tool, for example, is that something that was, okay, going in, here's the guardrails you have, here's how they're set up. Is that something the agencies are starting also to consider, setting up those guardrails so folks know in the front end?
Yeah, I mean, they're setting up guardrails, they're setting up deployment timelines and approaches, they're limiting functionality so that the solutions that are getting deployed are well understood and as secure as possible. Things that organizations can do to limit that would be preventing people from uploading documents, would be one example. Making sure that the solution is in a secure cloud environment would be another. And then there are all sorts of tools and guardrails to monitor the information that's getting put in to make sure that it's within the bounds of what the organization wants.
I know the secure cloud piece has been very popular. I think I'm not sure if it was the Army or the Air Force. One of them just recently announced they're using some Gen AI tools in a secure cloud. So I think that's been a very popular approach to take on in that test bed. The other side of the obstacles we haven't talked about, of course, is the policy side, the lawyers, the regulations. Is that the next phase of this kind of morphine, this evolution of AI, or is that being worked? We know a lot of the executive orders starting to look at this. We know OMB policy has come out to say, hey, don't discourage the use of Gen AI, for example, but a lot of agencies need some more comfort. Is that kind of the next phase you're seeing?
I think so. We're seeing through the guidance that the federal government put out, an encouragement of the use of these AI tools, while at the same time some standards set on things like safety impacting use cases and rights impacting use cases. So there's definitely an interest in making sure that these tools are used in an ethical and appropriate and responsible way, which is a great thing for society. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing inside organizations, the Office of General Counsel and the CDOs and the program leaders all working together to align their policies and draft policies that help to make sure the organization's using these tools in a safe way.
I think that's the one major change in all my years of kind of being in the federal sector, that when you saw new tools, when the cloud came out in the early 2010s, yeah, when you see a lot of the cybersecurity challenges and it started in the mid 2000s, this collaboration of the general counsel, the CIO, CDO role, even the program was not together. Does that surprise you when you walk in the room and you think you're meeting with a client and I'm meeting with the program, and then all of a sudden these other folks are there too? Or is that not as surprising as it once was?
I think it's expected at this point. Yep. Literally yesterday, I was in a meeting where we're working on this project with one government organization, helping them develop an AI strategy. And we had someone announce themselves as the auditor who was in the room, which definitely makes you sit up straighter, right? But it's good because everyone's at the table as we're talking through how they are going to use these tools against their mission. So you're getting the right input up front, which helps guide the organization, on their roadmap.
I think that's really refreshing, because so many times I've heard during cybersecurity where there's a disconnect. And when you say auditor, I'll assume it's the inspector general sort, but there's a disconnect between the people doing cyber and the people doing the auditing, and you get you didn't do A, B, and C, you only did A, B, so -1, and the cyber person goes, I didn't want to do C, and then it's back and forth. Ed, let's take a quick break. We'll come back, we'll jump deeper into AI. My guest today is Ed Van Buren, the government leader for artificial intelligence at Deloitte Consulting. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to the discussion Scaling AI in Government, sponsored by Deloitte on Federal News Network. Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Scaling AI in Government, sponsored by Deloitte on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Ed Van Buren, the government leader for artificial intelligence at Deloitte Consulting. Ed, before break, we're talking a lot about where the agencies are today, kind of some of the trends you're seeing, the idea of they're getting more comfortable with AI, they're bringing the right people together to talk about what goes into how to create the tools of the future. At the beginning of our discussion, I mentioned there were more than 700 use cases in the federal AI inventory. There's probably hundreds of more now. Yeah. What are some good use cases that you're seeing among your clients that they're really trying to dig their teeth into when it comes to AI?
Jason, we're seeing clients look at their use cases in several primary categories. The first really is around knowledge management. Generative AI specifically allows organizations to quickly access data from previous documents, from policy manuals, from procedures, and bring that information much more rapidly to the worker or to the external stakeholder in a much easier to consume fashion than the hundreds of pages that you might get out of a typical search. So that's been an extremely popular use case, and we've been helping our government clients deploy policy engines and things of that nature repeatedly because it's such a powerful use case. Another one that we've seen is around case management. So many government organizations have functions that rely on case management to keep the train running. Whether it's a benefits situation, a grants management situation, a healthcare situation, there's lots of steps, lots of data that flows through that organization, and in that process, these tools are really powerful at letting the caseworker interact with that information, getting it in more easily, seeing what's already in the system so that they can react to it and make their decisions based on information they already have, applying their policies and their guidelines and their rules. The generative AI tools allow that process to be more efficient. Another big one we're seeing is all of the interactions with citizens and external stakeholders. So that could be through a web portal, it could be through a call center, it could be in sort of an intake scenario or in a retail location. All of those places, people are trying to get information, they're trying to start some sort of government transaction, they're trying to share their information, provide information, and these generative AI tools really make that process smoother and do it in a way that's both more efficient but easier and more natural for the citizen to engage with.
Let me start on the last use case, the interactions with citizens. There's been a big push, of course, from the Biden administration around customer experience to improve it. Are we talking about something simple as a chatbot or something more advanced?
Certainly a chatbot is something that we could see more of, right? Chatbots that are better and that are more intuitive, that meet us where we are and are able to quickly engage us in a conversation and get the information that they need to provide the service that we need. That would be great. I wish we saw more of them everywhere because I don't want to be on the phone in an IVR tree. I'm sure you don't either, right? So anything that can make that process a little smoother is going to be great. It can go much further. I mean, if we think of all of the different life cycle events that people go through, where you get married, that triggers a whole series of governmental activities. You move states, that triggers a whole bunch of activities. You have a new job, like all of those create all of these needs for processes in multiple government organizations at the federal, state, and local levels. Generative AI could bring that together in a way that was more seamless, where it helps the citizen understand all the steps that are necessary and then help point them to start those steps.
I think we're seeing that with the White House and Office of Management Budget's Life Experiences, high impact service providers effort. They're saying, hey, if you want to do this, apply for benefits because you're a veteran. You don't need to know, okay, do I go to VA, do I go to USDA, do I go to HUD, where do I need to go? It's here's everything you need, and let it, the spider webs go from there.
That's right.
Case management's another really interesting one. Agencies have for years been trying to develop case management systems, some more successful than others. Talk a little bit about that one and what goes into applying AI to a case management system, because I think, as you said, that's common across a lot of agencies.
So part of case management is getting the information in at the beginning, but along the way, depending on what the scenario is. So a lot of that could be an initial interview or set of documents that come in that need to be parsed into the case management system, into the right places. Generative AI can help to break that information logically in to quickly get things in and let whoever's initiating this transaction know what's missing. Right? Because the objective is to get this activity moving, And if there's missing information, that stops it. And it creates, follow-up loops, all of which take time, effort, and prevent the person from getting whatever service or benefit or whatever the purpose of the case management system is. So if we can get that more seamless and quickly, diagnose what is missing, get a complete case submitted, that helps accelerate the process.
And so many times, I think what gets frustrated to the citizen or the user is you submit it, and then 2 weeks later it comes back and says, you forgot something, start over, or begin again, or you go back to the end of the line to get your whatever process is. And if you can be told up front, hey, the tool says you missed A, B, and C. Okay, I did those. Okay, now you're good to go. I think that's a big benefit.
Right. And I think some of the pre-existing tools are there to say, you missed this form, or you missed this field. But they're not diving into the content and the quality of what you actually submitted. With these new AI tools, you can opine on, hey, it looks like you might need more information in this area. So you can get a richer feedback loop there initially.
One of the big things I heard, kind of related, but a little to the side, is grants management and how it can open the door to so many more people to apply for grants, because all of a sudden the tool can tell them exactly this. I mean, it's not a case management per se, but it's the same, hey, you missed this, or hey, when you write your grant, here's some things to keep in mind. I talked to someone in Interior, they were very concerned we could get thousands of grant applications. So I think that's a great example. The last one is knowledge management.
Yeah.
That's been a huge area of kind of under appreciation from the government for years. When people retire, how do you capture what they know? And then how do you understand what's in all these new policies that come out? Is that, again, that's more of internal to the government employee, it's about employee experience as well?
Definitely. I mean, we look at organizations that have chronically unfilled positions in some areas, a workforce that has a high backload against them and rising workload levels. So they're trying to get their jobs done, in complex environments with complex policies and rules. Some of them have been there a long time and have rich histories of the organizational knowledge. Others that might be newer don't have that information. So if we can get those people more information quickly, the right information quickly, they can execute their task, do their work more efficiently, and we all benefit.
Yeah. I love the idea of knowledge management. I always thought that was one area where the government just continually struggled with, and AI is a great use case. So we went through 3 use cases. There's probably hundreds of others. How do you start prioritizing where do I start? I mean, it's like cybersecurity. It's like anything. I could start everywhere or nowhere, and that could lead to a lot of frustrations for agencies and organizations.
Generative AI is a new thing for most of us, and there's a risk, I think, that people are going to look for new problems to try to solve with it. And I would encourage organizations to look at the problems they already have. Start with things that are already on their list of areas to focus that are going to help their organizations be more efficient and more effective. And government leaders know what these things are, right? They've been around for a long time, these problems. And Gen AI can help, make a dent in some of them, and other AI as well. So start there, and then it's a journey. And it's a journey from where you are today to that future end state. And on that journey, the organizations are going to get more comfortable using these tools. Data quality is going to get better and better and better. The tools are going to get better and better. And so what we are eventually going to be able to do with these, we're not going to start there. We're going to start with more measured use cases, things where we can control the risk, we can get comfortable, we can get our workforce brought along and understand how to use this safely. We can let society start to grapple with the power of these tools, and their expectations are going to change as well. And then we can incrementally advance the use cases towards those ultimate use cases that I think many leaders are imagining, hey, we can jump right there. But they could, there's challenges with that. So we need to make sure that we get there safely and responsibly.
Is one of the biggest challenges you see when you talk to your government clients about using Gen AI is okay, we know what the problem is. We have this issue. How do I apply it? What do I need to do? Is there some sort of, I know there are frameworks to say, here's the kind of the questions you need to ask. How do you help them ask those questions and understand, oh, here's a good use case or here's not a great use case?
Yeah. So that would all fall into the process of governing, the use cases coming in. We use a couple frameworks. We use one called the AI Readiness Framework that helps us to look at the organization and make sure they have all the pieces and parts considered. So the strategy, the workforce elements, the governance, risk management pieces, the technology. Make sure that they have all pieces covered. Then when you get your use case and you bring it in, then you're going to be evaluating it against a framework. What's the technology that's needed? What's the risk level of this use case? What's the benefit to the organization? What's the cost? Because a lot of these use cases are fascinating, but we need to make sure that we can afford them for the long haul. So planning your use case against the total cost of ownership is an important step in that process. So getting all that information together as you're going through the decision-making process is a good step.
Do you get a sense a lot of agencies are we past the shiny object? Oh, look, AI, we got to use it, and okay, how do we think more deeply about where to apply it? I think we saw this with cloud computing, where a lot of agencies jumped into the cloud, and now I hear stories on occasion, well, we're going to get out of the cloud because it didn't make sense for that workload or that application because of the cost or whatever. Are you finding the same thing with AI, where maybe we're past the shiny object stage?
Definitely, we're getting more questions from government leaders on what's the benefit, what are the costs going to be, what are the risks associated with this. We're seeing as the government leaders are getting more familiar with this and they're going on their own fluency journeys, that they're asking a lot of good questions about how this technology is going to be used in their organizations to make sure that they get the benefit out of it.
Ed, we're just about out of time. I very much enjoyed our conversation. Before I let you go, I just always ask, what's the big takeaway that agencies need to keep in mind as we talk about Gen AI and as AI, they become more comfortable and enthusiastic about it?
3 things that we think government leaders should focus on as they go on their AI journey. The first is picking meaningful problems to solve and important use cases for their organization. Getting the benefit out of Gen AI is important. So making sure you're picking use cases that let you do that is going to be important. The second is bringing leaders together on the journey as you're going through the AI strategy and governance processes to select those use cases and launch them into the organization, making sure you've got good representation from across the organization, from the different departments that need to come together for a successful AI implementation. That's really important. And the last is treat AI like a journey, right? This is an incremental and iterative process, and the organization's going to get better and better at using AI over time as the tools mature and evolve. So the big step is make sure you're on that journey. Get started, get familiar with what these tools can do, and the benefits will accrue over time.
And a little bit of failure, not a lot of failure, but a little bit of failure is okay. You're going to have to trip a little bit when you learn to walk. So I think all good advice, Ed. Yeah. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. So let me thank my guest. Ed Van Buren is the government leader for artificial intelligence for Deloitte Consulting. Ed, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks very much, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Scaling AI in Government, sponsored by Deloitte on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Deloitte.